With much of our focus in the recent years on the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as current efforts to promote vaccine booster shots and seasonal influenza vaccination, we must not forget about the seasonal and global risk of norovirus. Now, we typically think of this as the winter vomiting bug due to what we saw in the clip just now, with the elimination typically being vomitus or diarrhea. This also brings us to how it's typically diagnosed and how you would typically have it diagnosed at the clinician's office if you're going to your primary care or urgent care, usually by a stool sample, a whole stool sample, or if you're only producing vomit, typically by a vomitus sample. Most people are usually going to that primary or urgent care within 12 to 48 hours, so 1 to 3 day typical onset of symptoms or after your exposure to that foodborne illness. And from that, recovery is typically around 1 to 3 days with traditional means of fluids and bed rest for you to clear the virus from your system, especially with it being a gastrointestinal issue, with gastrointestinal distress leading to the elimination issues that we've mentioned. While hospitals and any form of healthcare providers are required to report all outbreaks of acute gastroenteritis, there is no current mandate for state or local health departments to require reporting of individual cases. This just means that we need to be extra precautious and vigilant as always, as we have been in the past pandemic, to make sure that we're not exposing ourselves unnecessarily to potential aerosol or contact of fomite transmission risks. Specifically, like we'll see in a few video clips that I've made, we can look at different types of fomite risks in commonly touched surfaces, whether you're going out in public or in your personal residence, things that you may not typically associate, but could have a potential fecal, oral, or a surface transmission risk from a norovirus that is left behind. The virus itself can stay on a surface for up to 4 weeks, so it's important to clean it regularly, as bleach is the only known disinfectant that can properly remove it. While norovirus, just like a lot of other viruses, is believed to have originated from wild animals and human contact with them, it is predominant in lots of different domesticated animals or zoo animals. Specifically, pigs, cattle, dogs, rodents, bats, marine animals, and lions are ones that we see that have tested positive via real-time PCR for norovirus. Specifically, the first case was confirmed in 1968 in Ohio, where samples were isolated from a boy's stool, where they contained small circular virion structures that were later confirmed to be norovirus causing the boy's gastroenteritis. Given the transmission risks, we know that leafy vegetables, and especially seafood like shellfish and different filter feeders, are particularly high risks for norovirus transmission. The way in which shellfish accumulate norovirus to transmit to us is pretty gross. In terms of them actually accumulating it from sewage or wastewater that is being let out into the ocean and they're eventually taking up. Apart from that, that's also why we can associate in a similar light with leafy green vegetables and also with standing waters that are associated with them, because we often see mists or wet environments around these vegetables, especially with their proximity to soils or manures that are containing these infectious virions. Just as we maintain strong hand hygiene throughout the pandemic, we continue to through this coming flu season. It's important to continue this practice for norovirus in the coming winter months, especially as we expose ourselves to more fomite contact, surface contact, and aerosol droplet transmission risks. Specifically in terms of food, and for travelers especially, it's important to avoid potential sources of polluted water, and if you think there are sources of polluted water, to drink pasteurized products like pasteurized milk or pasteurized beverages, and beverages that you know are stored at below 4 degrees Celsius or at an appropriate temperature if refrigeration is not appropriate in the area that you're at. Furthermore, it's important to also patronize reputable businesses and support people that you're able to source your food from, whether that be shellfish or high quality produce, to know that you're not putting yourself at unnecessary risk just by consuming those raw foods and preparations that you enjoy. Here's my works cited, and thank you for paying attention to my presentation. I hope it was helpful and that you found some tips you can take away to help curb norovirus transmission.